Hello. My name is Al Filreis. This is not Al Filreis' voice, but this is Al Filreis. I'm here at the Kelly Writers House with my dear pal, Laynie Brown, who forgot to have breakfast.
I did, because I was so excited sending emails to everyone in Scotland.
It's too exciting. I mean, that's the only thing that will keep you from taking care of yourself, which is the excitement about Scotland. Hi, Laynie.
Hi.
We're joined today by Max, for whom 10 a.m. is a perfect time, because I think it's probably 3 or 4 in the afternoon in Berlin. Hi, Max.
Hey, Al. It's indeed 4 p.m.
4 p.m. So how was the day?
Great. We have some pretty lovely weather. The first sort of fall-y feeling day. It's been quite hot, quite warm all the month of September. So finally getting some cozy feeling around.
Berlin is good in the autumn. Philly is getting, 80 or whatever these last few days, which is just awful. Kate Colby is here from Providence. Hello, Kate.
Hi, everyone.
How are you feeling?
I'm still coughing. I have pneumonia.
Oh
no.
Maybe that's what I have.
Kate.
Oh, my goodness. Oh.
But hopefully it'll go better than last week.
So Allie Castleman is one of the most empathetic people I've ever met. As soon as you mentioned that you were sick, Allie gave us the little lower lip pout. Like, oh, Kate. Hi, Allie.
Okay.
Are you still in Long Island or are you back home?
I'm still on Long Island.
Oh, you're such a good family member. JS, we miss you here today. Hi.
Yes. Hello. I am right outside of Boston today, so.
Oh, can you reveal what you're doing, or is it a family thing or a professional thing? Or?
It's a little bit of a long story,
Okay.
so,
All right.
maybe for another time, come to my office hours and maybe you'll hear about it.
Okay, great. Oh, that's nice. I love office hours as a kind of slightly more intimate session than, masses of people watching a live webcast from around the world. I'm going to put out the phone number and remind you of how to Skype us. Chris is here and Zach are here. They are the two of them, and they are not testing the road gear. They tested the road gear last week in New York because we were on the road, and they are ready for Scotland. Chris, do you have a mic that works near you?
I do.
Okay. How confident are you that we can take all this gear to Scotland, 2 different cities, and make it all work?
Well, it's going to be a lot to pack, Al. It's, can't pack too many clothes because we need to pack the gear,
Yes,
carry that, haul that back and forth over the pond.
Okay.
And, so I'm going to pack light. I might wear the same shirt, once or twice.
Well, you're never on air. You're never on camera, so it doesn't matter. Oh, my God. That's such a biased thing to say about the person who makes it all possible.
We're excited,
right.
though. We're excited. It's a challenge to take this on the road, and we really enjoy it.
Why do we do it? I mean, I know why we travel and make videos, but doing a webcast from another town, it actually doesn't make that much sense, does it?
Well, it's so much fun, though. It's a lot of work. It doesn't make a lot of practical sense.
Fun is a good reason.
It's not a lot of practical sense on the tech side, but we have too much fun doing it. We can't stop.
Well, Max, I really wish you were able to get up there to Scotland, partly because the rental company is probably going to give us a van that works with manual transmission, so
No way.
Zach will be using his left hand to drive from the right side to shift gears and be looking in the mirror up to his upper left, and we could really use you. Because the insurance rates will go down if Max is there, because they'll look at Max and say, Max will never get you into a fix. Max has no comment.
It's not driving on the other side of the road is not as bad as it seems at first. Zach, I have faith in you.
Well, says the guy in Germany where they travel on the other side of the road, but whatever. Okay.
We do drive on the right.
Correct.
Side.
The correct side. Okay, couple of announcements, then we're going to get started with what I know is going to be a fun conversation. The number is 610-616-3208, 610-616-3208. Sometimes it happens that we have Sophia's under the weather and some other people. Probably it's too early in the morning for Dave, who's way out there in the West, and so we have a smaller group today, which is, has its own form of excitement. I think Erica has another commitment and so on. And everybody's resting up because next week, 7 p.m., the webcast is on Thursday, not Wednesday, by the way, Thursday, 7 p.m. local time, which I calculated recently was all kinds of weird times around the world. So it's going to be, everybody's resting up for that. So yes, we are, announcement one, we are in Scotland next week. We have 2 public events, and we're having a group of people follow, which is why we got a van, follow us around, be with us. We're very excited. It's going to be a mini reunion of ModPo people from across the years. I mean, Sharon Wells and her husband John, and I think they're bringing the dog. I'm not sure. You know, usually they're in canals on their flatboat, but they're finding a way to come up, I guess, in an automobile. We're going to see them. Irene is coming from Madrid. We're very excited about everybody coming to see us. Second announcement, I want to urge everyone who's watching today to comment on essays that have been posted in response to essay assignment number 2, which is a brilliant poem. There are many reasons why I get up in the morning and thank the Lord for Laynie Brown.
Oh.
Many reasons, many, like the planning of the Scotland trip. But today, it's just thinking about the wonderful selection of poems. 3 of the 4 essays in ModPo are renewed poems, close reading of poems that most people haven't seen. And the 4th is always the same. It's the response to a Bernadette Mayer writing experiment, or McClovian or KG and Mazostik. But in the case of essays 1, 2, and 3, you picked great poems. And so we have a Laureen
Thanks,
Niedecker
Al.
poem that is really, really great. It's called Subliminal. So it's the psychological objectivist Niedecker, not so much an imagist Niedecker. Oops.
It makes me want to ask Kate if she wants to say anything about Niedecker, because she was recently on a pilgrimage doing some readings in the area and visited her home. And now I can't remember if you reported back.
We saw pictures posted
During a
somewhere,
webcast,
right?
have you had a moment to say anything about that?
Yeah, I was in Wisconsin for 9 days. I went to Black Hawk Island and spent a few days in Fort Atkinson, where I gave a talk on Niedecker's little-known short fiction. And then we went up to Door County, Wisconsin, and recreated her journey that resulted in her long poem called Winter Green Ridge. So I really got immersed in her place.
And it's a small place, isn't it? The house.
Black
cabin.
Hawk Island is
Yeah.
is much smaller than I realized. And yes, the cabin, her little cabin, is quite small.
You know, Max was there a few years ago with some ModPo people and some other colleagues and made some videos. We forgot to commission you, Kate, to make some ModPo videos. But
Oh,
but
I'll go
it's-
back.
if you go to modpo.org and you click on Explore ModPo, or you can go to the far right of the banner and click on Database. Is it Database or Archive? Database. And then just search Niedecker as an, what do we use? The author, I think, is the artist. And look at all the Niedecker stuff. I mean, there's so much good Niedecker stuff in ModPo at this point. And you'll find some of Max's things there. Okay, so that's announcement number 2. Announcement number 3 is this. This is a meta announcement. I'm going to ask everybody who's gathered here to throw out a quick announcement of any kind, whatever it is, a reminder, an anticipation of something coming next, a shout out. So we'll start with Max, with Kate on deck. Any announcement at all?
My announcement is that my office hours will be shortly following today's webcast at noon Eastern time. So approximately an hour and 50 minutes from now. So please join me there if you want to keep the conversation going.
That's perfect, Max. Thank you. Kate, any announcement with Allie on deck?
Yes, I will also announce my office hour tomorrow at 11 a.m. And we've had a really good group every week and some really energized discussion. So I hope people will join.
Great. Allie with JS on deck.
My office hour is on Friday at 11 a.m. And next week I will be hosting a double office hour. So more details on that.
Oh, great. Would you remind me of that so I can post it to the page,
Yes.
to the Coursera page? Great. JS announcement with Laynie on deck.
Yeah, I feel like I'm waiting for someone to break the pattern, but it's not me. I'll announce my office hours, which are tomorrow at 10 a.m., so just about one day from today. And yeah, we've also have a great group, so would love to see old and new faces there.
Great. And by the way, just to plug it, we love the office hours. I mean, some of us have a particular group. We might even call them a following, like it's a seminar. It's a spontaneous seminar group, and they like to be with each other. And it's, I mean, with all due respect to everything else we do in ModPo, including the webcast, which is phenomenal. I think it's an amazing little feat that we do, if I do say so
Not to
myself.
praise
as
ourselves.
the inventor of the thing, with some help from the technical guys. But the office hours are the thing. That is the thing. I mean, if you are a ModPub person, you're feeling ashamed. Oh, I didn't make it past week 2, or life got in the way. But an office hour, it can be, generally, you don't have to be up to speed. Generally, somebody tosses out an idea, or maybe they look at a poem together, and it's like it's a seminar where you don't have to leave your office or your bedroom. Laynie announcement.
That's true. I just want to add to what you were saying that there's no preparation needed to come to office hours. You don't need to feel like you've read everything and studied it and have something. It's just a chance to be present with whatever poem happens. Yesterday
That's right.
in my office hours, or Monday in my office hours, we spoke for an hour about interior, and we had a great
Genevieve
time.
Taggart.
Yeah, we did. It was
Yeah,
fantastic.
you figured that poem out. The politics are very complicated.
It's very complicated. We had a lot of differing opinions, which was great.
Yeah.
So I'm going to also speak about office hours. I'm not going to be holding my office hours on Monday because I'm going to be in Scotland.
Wait, you're not doing office hours while you're in
Not.
Scotland? What the
So
heck?
I want to recommend all
Sluggard.
these good people's office hours.
Oh, good.
And then I also have 2 announcements, which I want to ballyhoo. Coming up in a couple weeks, we have a celebration of the life and work of Bernadette Mayer.
It's the
So
25th.
there will be an evening program with several speakers, including Leon Brown and 2 of Bernadette Mayer's children, Max Warsh and Marie Warsh, and her partner Philip Good, and Brenda Coltis, and 2 fabulous Penn alums who spent a summer living with Bernadette, Emily
Writers House
and
alums, we should
Julie Leviton, Emily Rush and Julie Leviton, and I might be forgetting someone else amazing in that lineup, but that's the 25th of October at 6 p.m.
Yep.
And then on October 31st and November 1st, there's going to be events memorializing the amazing poet Keith Waldrop that are all going to be streamed live from Brown University. 2 days of events like Kate Colby and myself and Leanne Brown and many others are going to be a part of. So that's it.
Very exciting. All right. And of course, every ModPo person tuning into this receives daily updates, and all that information will come. If you are watching this webcast, but you're not getting daily updates from me through the Coursera platform, contact us at modpo@writing.upenn.edu, modpo@writing.upenn.edu, and we will fix it up. We'll guide you to get the copies, or we'll just put you on another list, and we'll make sure that you get updated. Okay. Max and Laynie, will you do the YouTube comment stream? Keep an eye on it.
Yep, got it.
Okay. And Allie, will you check the special subforum thread? Okay. There were a couple of questions already there, and I picked them up, but if there's anything new, you'll let us know. All right. So 610-616-3208. Laynie, just tell us what's happening in the comment feed, and then I have an opening question for us.
Yeah, I see a lot of greetings so far. Let's see. What happens when I scroll
Any special greetings?
past the greetings? People are coming in from all over the place. There's somebody from Spotsylvania, Virginia. I'm saying that wrong.
Spotsylvania.
Spotsylvania.
You don't
thank
know
you.
your Pennsylvania geography
don't.
yet?
I really don't.
Okay.
Make sure you got some good scotch on the trip. That's from Peter
Wait, we're not.
Cussell
Yes,
for
thank you, Peter.
Scotland.
From Spotsylvania.
Lowell says, I've heard Magdalena from Poland might be able to join you. Yes, we're hoping to see her.
We're hoping to see Magdalena, yes,
And
from Warsaw.
yeah, that's it. We're just saying, thank you. Thank you to Al for
Somebody
the
thanked
daily
me?
updates.
Oh,
Yeah.
I like those
And
daily.
CJ
They take a while,
said,
by the way.
Thank
It's a
you,
big job.
CJ and Mona. A lot of my regulars here are on the chat.
All right.
Yeah.
Hey, okay. So Denny in the subforum thread for this webcast posted the following. Denny Stern, of course, from Seattle, one of our buddies. The whole chapter, meaning all of the 4 chapters of week 5, or possibly the communist chapter, not sure. The whole chapter seems obsessed with binaries. Actually, the poetry isn't. It's Al. I'm the problem. I am like a binaristic thinker as a pedagogical technique, so I apologize. Are they false binaries? Kenneth Fearing, amazing poet, his green light is on for us to cross. So Denny's just being Denny-like and clever. The green light, it's on, green light is on, and cross. I guess he means crossover, cross the binaries. So I wanted to pick up on that and riff just slightly and pose a question that all of us will get to answer since we're a small group today. Now I'm gonna read Green Light with my froggy voice, but it's gonna be fine. So I wrote a book, this book, quite a while ago, Counter-Revolution of the Word. And it's about how in the 1950s, during the period of Cold War, literary and other social and political consolidation, attacks were made by literary critics against the 30s, as if you could generalize. And what they really meant, thanks, Zach, what they really meant was the communist poets of the 30s, they must have been bad, because communism is bad, the Cold War would say. And so many of the poets of the 30s were treated as if they were, like Ruth Lechlittner, who did publish a book in the 50s, but nobody read it. She'd been branded a communist, very, very interesting poet, as we know from the poem about the abortion clinic. And she was just branded as a communist and forgotten. And so all these poets who actually were complicated in their relationship to modernism rather than binaristic antagonists of modernism were all basically put into the bin. And then we got to the 60s, when the 60s, this is quick literary history, the 60s came and a lot of young poet and literary historians wanted to recover the poetry of the 30s. They didn't have any access to it. The New Masses had been the magazine New Masses had been removed from shelves of the libraries. So all the 60s radicals who were trying to get back to the 30s literally didn't have the resources to do it. So Carrie Nelson, for instance, wrote a book on repression and recovery, trying to recover some of these poets. So I wrote a whole book on that mechanism of repression, the counter-revolution of the word. Revolution of the word referring to a phrase that was used to describe the modernism of the teens and 20s. So Stein and the Baroness and Dada and so forth. And the assumption was that when we got to the Depression, nobody wanted to be interested in that kind of modernist experiment anymore. And all they wanted to do was write plainly, descriptively, and narratively and conservatively about the social ills. And that's a false binary. Thank you, Denny. So I'm going to read Kenneth Fearing's Green Light. I'm going to ask everybody to comment on the whole question of the politics of this poem, which are really hard because Kenneth Fearing, who was a member of the Communist Party, wrote a poem that is linguistically and formally experimental. And yet he was brandished as a dumb communist, even though he wrote this poem. So that was quite a preamble. We'll start with Max, because he's so good about politics, and we'll go from there. Okay? Here is the poem Green Light, and it is in Modpo Plus. And actually, there's a recording of me reading the poem because we don't have any recording of Fearing. And you probably want to listen to that rather than this froggy version that I'm about to give you. And Chris is an audio guy, is wincing at my voice. Green light. Bought at the drugstore very cheap and later pawned. After a while, heard on the street, seen in the park. Familiar, but not quite recognized. Followed and taken home and slept with. Traded or sold or lost. Bought again at the corner drugstore, at the green light, at the patient's demand, at 9 o'clock. Reread and memorized and rewound. Found unsuitable, smashed, put together, and pawned. Heard on the street, seen in a dream, heard in the park, seen by the light of day, carefully observed one night by a secret agent of the Greek Hydraulic Mining Commission, in plain clothes, off duty. The agent, in broken English, took copious notes, which he lost. Strange, and yet not extraordinary. Sad, but true. True, or exaggerated, or true. As it is true that the people laugh and the sparrows fly, as it is exaggerated that the people change and the sea stays, as it is that the people go, as the lights go on, and it is night, and it is serious, and just the same. As someone dies, and it is serious, and the same. As a girl knows, and it is small and true. As the corner hardware clerk might know, and it is true and pointless. As an old man knows, and it is grotesque, but true. As the people laugh, as the people think, as the people change, it is serious and the same, exaggerated or true. Bought at the drugstore down the street, where the wind blows and the motors go by, and it is always night or day. Bought to use as a last resort. Bought to impress the statuary in the park. Bought at a cut rate at the green light at 9 o'clock. Borrowed or bought to look well, to ennoble, to prevent disease, to entertain, to have. Broken or sold, or given away, or used and forgotten, or lost. Max, not your typical communist poem, needs reevaluation, the politics of poetry. All right, you're first, Max. Say anything. Kate's on deck.
Yeah, sure. That was a great reading, by the way, Al. And I appreciate Denny bringing this up in part because this is also a question that Denny brought up in one of my office hours a couple of weeks ago, not related to this week, obviously, but just more to the sort of the pedagogical deployment of binaries that we find again and again throughout Motbo. And I think, Denny is right insofar as most binaries are probably false binaries, but I think I would agree with you, Al, that a binary is very useful for wrapping your head around, problems in general or why something might not be what it seems. Thinking in binaries can actually get you a lot of conceptual mileage. With respect to this poem, I mean, right. So obviously, I think this poem, being somewhat more on the experimental side, obviously invites this sort of binary crossing. We don't want to necessarily say that it's just a communist poem, i.e., that it's a poem about how economic relationships structure all of society and our inner lives and everything, right? Because it also seems to contain its own poetic theory. And I was really struck, this time here with this repeated invocation of truth and exaggeration, which makes me think, or at least today made me think immediately of Dickinson's Tell All the Truth, but Tell It Slant, that there's this theory of poetics or this theory of language that's being worked out in this poem around the matter of truth and how truth gets relayed, how it gets portrayed, how it gets represented, and how you can have something like exaggeration, which is a useful political tactic, and how it actually it operates in the realm of truth in a slightly different way. And that's something that this poem, I think, wants to explore and sort out for itself. So I think, we have actually this somewhat fascinating and not necessarily entirely political theory that's being worked out here alongside some more familiar kind of calls towards class consciousness.
Thank you, Max. Fantastic start on the conversation. Kate, turn to you for any thoughts.
Yeah, I'm just encountering this poem for the first time,
Oh,
but
really? Wow. What'd you think?
well, I love it. And it strikes me as quite different from many of the poems in the main
Definitely.
syllabus for
Yeah.
week 5. I've been thinking a lot during this week about political poems, overtly political poems, especially ironic ones, which we see a lot of this week, and how they pre-chew the thoughts and feelings for the reader, for our easy digestion.
Yes.
But in this poem, he's not it concerns truth, but it's not telling us what truth is, or ironizing an idea of truth, I don't think. So it's a lot more subtle than, say, Genevieve Taggart's poems.
Yeah, although the interior, Taggart was not just a communist, but an active part of the movement. And her poem, that poem that we use, Interior, was published in, I think, the Proletarian Literature of the United States, edited by Max Eastman at a time of the communist heyday. So it's a programmatic poem, but still incredibly complicated because of its, can't really tell what's going on with the middle class there. But yeah, you're right. This week, I want to turn to Allie next. This week, it's possible, taking the lead from Max's observation about the pedagogy, this week, week 5, what we're trying to do is say that there are doubts or questions or elaborations of modernism. Some take the form of counter-argument, such as Frost, even though, frankly, even that doesn't work. And of course, the communist poets would seem to think that someone like Gertrude Stein was, revanchist, right, conservative, even though her poetics are radical. So there's a lot of criticism by the communists, but they also really learned modernism and, in Fearing's case, really put it to use. In terms of the Harlem Renaissance poets, there's no way you can say that the Harlem Renaissance poets, as was done in the 50s and early 60s, that they are antagonistic to modernism. That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous and potentially literary critical form of racism, right? The assumption that if you really wanted to talk about black life in the United States in a poem, that you couldn't possibly be Steinian. And that's just wrong-headed. I mean, that's basically what my book is about, and we have to undo that. And the way to undo it is not necessarily to avoid the simplicity of binarisms, but to present them as they have been promulgated, and then have a conversation about how things do or don't fit. It's no different, really, than having a tastes great, less filling, silly argument about whether Dickinson or Whitman better represents the movement forward into experimental poetry of the 20th century. That's ridiculous. However, we do it because we want people to talk about Whitman as distinct from Dickinson. Anyway, I'm running on. Allie, followed by JS.
Yeah, I agree with what Kate said about this poem is certainly not pre-chewing its own meaning for us.
Sure, we don't even know what's being bought at that drugstore. We have
right,
some idea,
like it's the form. I mean, if you could like pinpoint the form of the poem, you could say like, this is a riddle. This is a riddle poem, and like through that mechanism, I think it mimics or replicates a certain like deviousness of how truth, or like the pursuit of truth, or the scrambling or like purposeful manipulation of truth actually works in our lives and like as a political tool. And so I'm particularly interested in the lines and the kind of just, yeah, as Max was saying, like the repetition of exaggeration and truth, but the kind of trickiness where of the line, as it is exaggerated that the people change, and then a few lines down, as the people laugh, as the people think, as the people change. And so even through, like even line to line, the way that like truth is being described here, rendered, is unstable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and absolutely. And the people is a phrase that when you write a poem in the late 20s or 30s and you're a leftist, when you say the people, it means something, but the people change. The fact is that nobody had a stable recognition of what the masses meant, despite Stalinism or Trotskyism or whatever. The people change, just like the syntax changes. We don't even know what it is that's circulating economically and socially here, and not to mention in a misogynist way, the whole economy, possibly a sexual economy, of what's happening in that drugstore is unstable. JS and Laynie, final thoughts on this poem? I'm really glad I brought it up because I don't think we talk about this very much in Modpo.
Yeah, it's such an interesting poem. And I guess one thing that I was thinking about as you were reading it is that binaries are necessarily abstracted, condensed and simplified, I think was what, we were talking about a little bit. And this poem, especially, let's see, in stanza 4, the longer stanza that has all of the, lines that begin with as it is, that explore truth, sort of elaborate and start and stop on all of these like different, or like touch ground a little bit and begin to spill out a narrative of what could possibly be true, but by proliferating all of these sort of more grounded or like narrative explorations of this idea of truth, necessarily get away from the sort of binarism of what truth or exaggeration could be. And the other thing that I was sort of noting, again, thinking about how this poem sort of frustrates binaries, is there's a repetition of units of 3 at the end of many of these stanzas. So in the first stanza, traded or sold or lost. Traded or sold, you might think of that as a sort of opposition, but then lost sort of complicates that, and again, like is something that extends beyond that initial opposition of traded or lost, as though those were the only 2 choices. And then smashed, put together, and pawned is a very different progression of 3, because here it's sort of temporal. It's smashed and then put together and then pawned. So then by the time we get to true or exaggerated or true, which circles back in on itself, there's just another moment where you're like, oh, okay, it's like an opposition that returns to its opposition. And so, yeah, I don't know. There's just a really interesting way that this poem is sort of rearranging and sort of reassembling an opposition or a binary of truth or exaggerated to mean a lot of different things, or to see all of the like cracks and fragments in the way that we might think about it.
So well said, JS. Thank you. Fearing and some others are key to the left or radical politics of many avant-garde poets, leading up, for instance, to certainly a bit for certain leftist beats. A few. Ginsberg is very influenced by Fearing, by the way. And then some new American and particularly the language poets who came of age in the late 60s, came of age poetically in the 70s and early 80s, and really latched on to this repression and recovery sense of what got wiped out in the pre-war period, focused for someone like Charles Bernstein on the European disaster of World War II, in particular the Holocaust. And the rise of fascism meant that a lot of poets who were looking for social revolution and social change like Fearing were writing like Fearing in the 30s in Europe in different languages, and got completely wiped out, became persona non grata, or came to the United States and started over. And some of the language poets, like Bernstein's sort of radical secular Jewish poets, Jerome Rothenberg, a slightly older generation, did the same, to try to embrace people, to restore the idea that radical, poetic form and content can happen in an avant-garde poetics. It doesn't have to be Edwin Rolfe describing the guy on the street who dies because he's hungry. Not to mock that poem, but this is a really good, important thing that Chapter 5, not just the Communist Poets, does to make possible chapters 8, 9, and 10 later. Jackson McClough, great example, an anarchist, an anarcho-pacifist of week 9. There's no way he'd be caught dead doing a descriptive narrative poem. But he learned a whole lot from this suppressed and disappeared group. I'm saying the same thing again.
I love this.
Yeah, I'm really going for it. And I'm just going to entice someone to call
Plug it.
610-616-3208. And this is a hard to find and expensive book. The first person who calls gets this copy of my book. So call 610-616-3208. And if no one
I
calls,
would call, but
if no one calls, I'm giving it to
doing this.
Laynie. Okay. Laynie,
Okay, I
before
have
you
it.
make your comment,
Okay.
tell us what the people in the YouTube thread are saying about this poem.
okay.
And Max, you can pipe up too, since it's
Aiden
your job.
Hunt says it is depressingly timely.
Yeah, you're right, Aiden. And by the way, Aiden, thank you for everything you're doing this year.
Maybe this has already
Mod
been
Pope.
asked, but what is the opposite of binary?
Modpo.
That's baloney is who wrote that. John Rinker says true or exaggerated or true seems like 3 different things, as if the first true is not the same as the second one in the line.
Max, any others you want to add?
Yeah, Holly York mentions, or asks rather, about the anaphora of bought, this repetition of bought, this idea of acquiring and losing, asking capitalism, question mark. That's, yeah, I mean, there's so much we can do with this poem, just like on the level of the line, like in terms of close reading it, right? Like looking at these devices like anaphora.
Something's going around that we need the drugstore to alleviate. And it's somewhat illicit in the attempt to alleviate. It has to do with girls and women, possibly. It's the 30s. People are poor. The healthcare monolith is not particularly interested in the kind of people who need help. I mean, I'm just winging it. I don't know. Mm-hmm. But, think about the period of AIDS or the period of the first months of COVID, and think about the language of circulation and of desperation and of loss. This is really kind of a pandemic, healthcare is not set up to help anybody kind of poem. And that you cannot write it narratively. You have to write alongside the social and economic, the tilted against and biased sense of circulation, of trading, I don't know, services for goods. Who knows what's going on here? A lot of people are sick because of the economics. And this thing flows the way it flows as a critique of it. I really like this poem, apparently. Laynie, your thought? And then we'll move on.
Yeah, I'm really loving this poem, and it strikes me that, it's all about movement, and it's all about movement as survival, and it's also all about withholding as survival. So what's the elephant in the room? What's the thing that we can't say because it's illegal if we say it, and also because it approaches the inexpressible. It's constantly morphing and changing as it moves from one to another to another person. So that's so Modpovian, right?
Yes,
and how it's said is reflecting what cannot be said.
Oh, so well put. Thank you all. That was fabulous. We have someone on the phone who's apparently getting a copy of my book. Chris, are you ready to bring this person up? Or is this person just calling to say hi to you?
No. This is Mona calling from Indiana.
Mona.
Hey, Mona.
That's great. Okay, Mona, can
Hi.
you hear me? Hi, Mona. How are you?
Hi.
How are you doing? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, and I'm a little stuffy also from sinuses.
Oh, I'm
but yeah, I
sorry.
wanted to get a copy of your book.
Oh, great. So make sure that you give Chris your address. Chris has already got it. And I'm happy to send you a copy of the book. And the only thing you have to do within the next 2 years, because I know it takes a long time to get to the stack of books that you're supposed to read, is just to write me a note sometime about, what it was like to read that book and so on.
I will do that.
Okay,
And I
good.
have a shelf. I have a to be read shelf, not a stack.
Oh, a shelf? Oh, Mona,
Yes.
you're one of those. Okay. Tell us about yourself. I mean, you're in, did you say Iowa?
Indiana.
Sorry. Oh, my God. I'm sorry. I don't know the Midwest very well. You're in Indiana, and this is this is your second time in ModPo?
Yes, it is.
Great. And thank you for participating. What's it like so far? What's it been like this year for you, ModPo?
It's been better. And the reason it's been better is the office hours, honestly.
Oh, great. Great. Which office hour have you been to most recently?
Recently, I know I went to Laynie's.
You went to Laynie's, yes.
And then I went to Dave's. Yeah.
What are some adjectives you would use to describe Laynie Brown? She's open-minded. I'll start. She's open-minded. What else?
And bubbly.
Lovely. Yeah.
Energetic and friendly.
Yeah. Almost sprightly sometimes.
Enthusiastic.
Enthusiastic, yeah. She's getting embarrassed here, Mona.
I am, but thank you, Mona. It's so sweet. I love having you at Office Hours. Yeah. We have a great group. Come join us, everyone.
Yeah. Do you have a comment or question, or you're just coming to claim the book, which would be perfectly fine?
Well, that was the main reason that I was calling.
Okay, that's fine.
But I had never seen that poem before.
You what? I'm sorry.
I had never seen that poem. I hadn't read it yet.
Yeah.
But I didn't hear what Laynie said.
It's in ModPo Plus, and I always put out the link to the recording of the webcast, so you can scroll back and hear what we've said. Yeah, you weren't able to hear because you were talking to Chris. Chris does that. Yeah. He distracts people. But also, let me just say something and reveal a little of the mechanism of ModPo, and then we'll let you go. What we do is we have a staff member here, McKenna Devereaux, who goes through the recording of every webcast and makes an outline with timestamps for me. And then I choose, JS is hearing about this for the first time, doesn't know this. And then I choose segments and clips, and we make video clips. And then we add them to the ModPo Plus syllabus and to modpo.org. So this will inevitably be like a 12-minute or 15-minute, I don't know how long that was, maybe longer, segment on this poem. And now, soon, it will be added to ModPo Plus under the Fearing poem. There's an initial old video of us discussing it. And now there will be a new video based on this webcast discussion. And that's how we accumulate what we call further discussions. And it just goes on ad infinitum, which is really great, I think. So you'll be able to go back and see it again.
Nice.
Thank you so much for calling, Mona, and we will get this book to you. And thanks for being part of the ModPo community.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, have a great day. All right, that was Mona from Indiana, 610-616-3208. I have another topic, and then I'm going to turn it over to Laynie, who has a question about Ann Spencer. Zach, would you put up the text that I'm interested in? Oh, there it is. Okay. This is another communist, Bob Brown, also known as Robert R. Brown. I can't remember the middle initial. Bob Brown, who was part of the left, but his poetry is all very avant-garde, very experimental. This is from the book called Gems, Gems. And what Gems is it was published in 1932, I think, right in the middle of the Depression. And he thought of this as a radical poem, that is content, like radical left poem. And this and others. So he took little gems, what do we call them? Chestnuts, poems that often rhyme and are very metric. And he did, what do we call this, Kate? Blackout poetics? What's it called?
Mad Libs.
Well, there's Mad Libs, but there's a whole erasure poetry. Erasure poetry. Yeah. It's a thing that, you know, some great poets, Canadian poets in particular, have done a lot of. And anybody can do it. So Mad Lib, you just take a big thick marker and you take out some words. And I'm going to ask Max and Kate to respond. I'll read it, and I'll ask Max and Kate to describe the effect of the blackout. And of course, the intention here is to cause us to have to do some work, devious work. And of course, politically, it's a mockery of censorship. So this is Marlowe, a stanza from The Passionate Shepherd to His Love. What should I do for the blanks? Should I just say,
I love that.
Because it's
Make
my voice.
a different sound for every...
No, I'm going to make the same sound.
All right.
Okay. Come live with me and be my and we will all the pleasures prove that and and all the craggy yield. There will we sit upon the rocks and see the shepherds their flocks. Max, what do you have to say about this radicalism?
The choice of sound effect definitely, I would say, colors my interpretation. But I think it's, well, obviously it's a send up of a kind of you know, classic governmental censorship that, you know, anybody on any sort of radical fringe would be familiar with, right? The sort of blacking out of sensitive materials from official documents, or, you know, official internal documents, or just the censoring of things that were sort of, you know, unfit for the males. And
but
you know,
why Marlowe? Why choose Marlowe for that?
Well, the point is, of course, to say that you can even take this sort of this classic 16th century. 17th, early 17th century pastoral love poem, and you know, by blanking out certain things, you turn it dirty or racy or controversial, right? That, like,
well, wait,
you know,
Max,
innuendo.
are you admitting that you filled in the blanks with racy? Are you admitting that? Because not all of us would do that. I mean, what does a shepherd do with his flock?
Sorry?
He tends to his flock. He shepherds his flock. What are you talking about, Max?
Well, sure,
Dirty mind.
but you know, once we started selectively eliminating information, then rather than covering anything up, right, which is the point of censorship, you know, I think the point here that this poem is trying to make is that when you start to cover things up, you actually inspire a different kind of suspicion, or you create innuendos, right?
That's right. And that, I'm going to turn to Kate, but that, the result of this fixed Marlovian, I know what I want to say poetically, you need to read it. I know you don't. I have, you want. I write, you read. That binarism gets broken down so that we have to do the work of filling in. And when we do, we radicalize Marlowe. And that is really quite an achievement for a poet like Bob Brown, who didn't write anything original there and just the only thing he did is erase some words and suggest an openness. So radicalism is an openness rather than closing it down and telling you what to care about during the Depression. It's just incredibly, it makes possibilities in a very energetic way, and it's hilarious because it catches all of us doing the illicit thing. It's great. Yes, thank you. Okay, Kate, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I no longer have it in front of me, but
oh, Zach, you want to put it back up?
That's okay. I can go. By redacting words or excising words, there it is. He's eviscerating or disabling the rhyme and the formal effects of the source poem.
Yeah, the rhyme in the first and third lines has been ruined.
Right.
By the way,
and
what is it? Come live with me and be my love, isn't it?
Right.
So what was the original rhyme? Will you look it up, Laynie?
Got it.
The original rhyme on the third.
It's that hills and valleys, dales and fields,
Oh, fields. So it doesn't rhyme.
and then yields after that. It's love, prove, fields, and yields.
Okay, go ahead, Kate. Sorry.
That's okay. But that rhyme, the way it lands with a thud at the end of each line, recapitulates the overdetermined social roles that are implicit in the poem. And so he's kind of eviscerating those predetermined meanings, pre-chewed historic truths by disabling those formal effects.
Yeah. Laynie, would you find out what people are saying about this poem?
Sure.
And in the meantime, I'm going to look for another Bob Brown poem that we have in ModPo.
All right. So let's see. Miranda Jubb says it's censoring the canon, usually the texts that are supposedly most accessible. Vijaya says you should listen to him reading The Baroness. Oh, is talking about you?
Me, yeah. I get
That's
drunk
fun.
on The Baroness.
I agree with Max. We need a little bell or something, says Mona. And Jane, yeah, those sound effects were colorful. Aiden Hunt, how did Marlo come up with that? Huh?
How did
Brilliant.
Marlo come up with it?
That's right.
Here's another gem. I'll just read it aloud.
Okay.
It's from a poem called The Lord of Burleigh by Tennyson. By the way, when I was a grad student, I took a grad seminar on Victorian poetry. Boy, is Victorian poetry bad. Can I say that? Am I allowed to say
You just
that?
said it.
Oh my gosh. Tennyson can be so bad. Anyway, The Lord of Burleigh is a poem I had to read in grad school. All right, here is Bob Brown's gem version. In her he gaily, if my by signs can tell, maiden, I have thee daily, and I think you me well. I do not want to comment further on that. But Tennyson did not have anything in mind that we all have in mind, I can assure you, being a Victorian. Laynie Brown, tell us about Anne Spencer. What's your thought about Anne Spencer? And we're all, starting with JS and Allie, we're all going to comment.
Okay, so we're going to look at her poem, Earth, I Thank You, which is in ModPo Plus Chapter 4, Week 5, Part 3, in case you want to try to scroll there. Earth, I Thank You, or maybe just a Google search.
Right.
And shall I just read it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Earth, I thank you for the pleasure of your language. You've had a hard time bringing it to me, from the ground to grunt through the noun to all the way feeling, seeing, smelling, touching, awareness. I am here. Wow. So here's my question. Consider the line to grunt through the noun. Connecting it to our conversation last week about nouns in Stein, and also this week, what nouns are standing in for in this poem in a lot of the material. I think Allie's ready because she's shaking her head.
Yeah. And Laynie, will you interlocute rather than me in response to the responses?
Sure. How many people should
I think
ask?
everybody should. I think
Everybody, 'cause we're
let's
a
start
small
with
group.
Allie and JS and then see where we go.
Okay. Allie, what are your thoughts?
The noun in this poem is so there isn't a negative connotation, but there's such a limit there. It's you've had a hard time bringing it to me, from the ground to grunt through the noun. There's actually a gratitude. I mean, gratitude courses through this poem. There's a gratitude for the noun, but the noun is kind of a gateway into all of the rest of the language. Feeling, seeing, smelling, touching, ultimately presence. And, last week we were talking about how Stein destabilizes, strangifies nouns that we're used to so that we can really just broaden our experience of a language and of things, right? And in my I have in mind most recently Al's sound effect, which it's easiest to bleep out the nouns, but what we're left with if we don't do the easy, I think the easy thing sometimes in erasures like the ones we just looked at is concentrating on the noun and trying to like fill in the noun, because that's kind of the game of it. But I think it can be harder, more interesting work to just kind of forget about the nouns, and say like, it doesn't matter. They've been erased for a reason. And like part of the function, yes, like there's the side of the poem where you can try to fill it in, but what happens if you concentrate on everything that's around the noun? So the feeling, seeing, smelling, touching.
Amazing. I just want to repeat back noun as limit, gate, and then ask one follow-up question. If it noun as an erasure, right? Now, if noun is a stand-in for the things we aren't saying, then what are some of the reasons in the week 5 material that the noun is erased? Like as in the fearing poem that we just talked about.
Is that for me?
I mean, if you want, or we can just throw it out there.
Well, I'll just give one.
Yeah.
Danger, political consequence. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you, Allie. Let's go to Kate.
I think JS was going to be next. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, I don't think I quite have an answer to that second question yet. But I guess thinking about how here noun both is referring to the noun and also what noun refers to, or like what the noun is actually referring to, i.e. a material object or an idea or something else. I don't know. I guess I'm kind of struck by the way that language and, the terms of language, i.e. nouns, both refer to themselves and are sort of metaphors for what language refers to. Like, I'm trying to think of how to characterize this in terms of being a meta poem, because as a poem, it really is about language, but it's sort of the meta aspect is really about the way that language is always referring to something else. And so, yeah, I don't know. I guess thinking back to Gertrude Stein's sort of cynicism or irony, ironic playfulness with the noun. Here, it seems like grunting through the noun again, just echoing what Allie was saying a bit, but like sort of materiality, the phenomenology of just saying something, as well as the encounter with the actual object, the ways that we are able to interact with real things coming from nature. I really just hear a sort of like language or the language of like fruitfulness or just life, bounty in this poem. And the way that nouns give way to verbs. Nouns give way to ways of interacting with them, the feeling, the seeing, the smelling, the touching.
Fantastic. I really appreciate your pointing to the meta, which is so present in everything that we're reading in ModPo, and thinking about Stein, like it's not just doubling, but it's just exponentially multiplying the meanings when we think about the noun, which is so helpful and in a lot of the work ahead. And this poem, it's so graceful because it's so concise, and the grunt is reminding me of those sounds that Al was just making in the
Can you try making that sound?
I cannot, but I do think at another time it might be fun to have multiple people read the erasure with different sounds to see how that might affect how it might color our reading of the erasure poems.
Hey, Laynie,
Yeah.
can we just look at the nouns in the poem?
Sure.
Earth, pleasure, language, time, me, ground, noun, way, awareness, and I think here, though here is not really a noun, I think it is here because I am here. It's equivalent to I. I is also a noun, by the way. And I just want to think about here as a noun. Because the poem is addressed to Earth, but what the Earth produces is Anne Spencer's garden, which was a center for a lot of Harlem Renaissance. She was older than them, but she was in the movement at the same time, but she was just a generation older. And the garden was a place where black poets would come and get support from her. It was kind of a garden matriarchy for the Harlem Renaissance, for lack of a better phrase. And here is what is harvested and yielded from the garden. Right? That's the I am here. It's like that Ray Armantrout, the way, another word that's in the poem. I am here. I am, the noun is here, right here in this place and in this poem.
It's present tense and it's perishable because the garden doesn't wait.
Also, the poem is perishable because, nobody read this poem for forever. She was unknown.
But the perishable is what's most valuable, that gives us sustenance.
Absolutely.
Like the meetings in the garden that you're talking about, the conversations that we didn't hear, but that happened.
Yeah. It's a meta poem, even though it doesn't have to be, because of here. Makes me think that here is the poem that comes from the garden. Fruit of the garden. It's, people can read this poem and think, oh, well, it's not really Harlem Renaissance because it doesn't participate in the modern. It's a garden poem. But no, I think it's a reference to the biographical Anne Spencer and the role that garden played. Somebody's got to write about Anne Spencer in this way. I mean, I've read a couple of articles, but we have someone on the phone. Who is it, Chris Martin?
We do. We have Jane calling from the St. Louis area. Jane Ward.
Jane Ward. Hi, Jane. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Al.
How are you?
I am doing great. Last time I called, I was in the Peoria area, but I moved over close to St. Louis, still in Illinois, though. I don't like those Missouri politics.
Are you you're not moving, you're just traveling, or you actually moved?
No, I moved here in November.
Oh, wonderful. So almost a year.
That's right. Coming
That's
up on
great.
it.
How are you doing? I guess that's a version of the version of that question is, how is ModPo for you? You don't have to tell us how you're personally doing, but what's happening?
I'm doing great, but I love ModPo time of year. It just gives me focus, and
great.
I learn more every year. So
that's great.
I've been here since 2012. So
yes, I know that. What's been on your mind lately from ModPo? A poem or a poet or a thought?
Well, this time around, it's the Abortionist office, that line.
Okay. Oh, wow.
The poem just really gets to me. It always has, but more so now. And things are just so fraught in the world. I never thought it would be like this.
Jane, I would like to invite you, at the risk of politicizing ModPo. I don't mean to do that, but we do it from time to time. I would like to invite you to say something about the politics, cultural and political, strategic political politics of abortion, complicated, in relation to rediscovering this poem after all these years, because you read it first in 2012 for ModPo when abortion was available, fairly widely available.
Right.
And now it is much less so. And what's it like to go back to a poem it's still the same poem as it was when you first encountered it, but now it's different?
Well, I thought we'd gotten past this era. In the 1970s, I had to have an abortion. I was a young teenager, not yet 16 years old, and we had to travel to Kansas. Kansas was the state you had to go to. And so the poem has always meant that to me. And I thought we were past that. I thought, oh, yes, now nobody has to do that anymore. And so now my reaction to it is we're right back where we were in the 30s. I'm in the 50s, in the 60s, in the 70s. I can't say that politically I'm so disappointed in what happened.
But tell me about Lech Littner's impact, because the poem is very complicated. It uses a churchly hymn in a satirical or ironic way. One might say that at the time, radical left antagonism to limits on women's right to choose to abort a pregnancy, it called for this kind of bitter satire. Now, once again, one might argue that. What do you think about Lech Littner's strategy at creating awareness in readers that there's something terribly wrong? What do you think about the poetic strategy she uses? Is it not enough? Does it leave you flat? Does it make you feel the sharp pain?
I thought it was brilliant.
Yeah.
And it kept me reading and trying to understand. And then the last line it was a sharp pain.
Thrust deep
No way
the
to get
long
out.
curette. Yeah.
Yes,
Go ahead, make my day. Radicalize me.
that's right.
Yeah.
And I have to say, for years and years, I never wanted to talk about abortion, but suddenly now I'm admitting it because I think I have to, Yeah. But
Thank you
that's me
for
politically.
sharing that, Jane. We appreciate it.
Yeah.
Well, you're welcome.
Yeah, I guess I want to say that I don't quite know what to say, but I'll say that you're having been with us for now a 12th year, and you're able to call us and have a frank conversation. And I guess I want to say 3 cheers to the Modpo poems, which create the Modpo community, the Modpo poems, which are open-ended and cause us to spend 12 years trying to puzzle through a poem like this. I have to tell you,
Yes, I thank everybody for being.
Go ahead, Jane.
I thank everybody for being here. The continuity of it and how things do change over time and the way we see them. It's wonderful to be able to experience it with a group of people.
Thank you, Jane. And I hope that since you're all settled, been in a house for a year. Usually people have been in a house for a year. There's still some boxes to unpack. But once you get it all unpacked, get in your... Go ahead.
That's okay, yeah.
Yeah, get in your car, Jane, sometime, maybe next fall, and drive or fly east to Philadelphia, where you will receive the red carpet treatment here at the Writer's House. We will welcome you. We'll buy lunch for you. We'll hang out, and you can come to one of our webcasts, and we can meet in person. What do you think?
I really want to do that. That's on my bucket list. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Gonna.
Thank you so much, Jane, for calling.
Thanks, Al.
All right. Have a great day. That was Jane Ward calling from, did she say Missouri? We've had 2 Midwestern calls today. Anyway, St. Louis area. Yeah. I was thinking about St. Louis recently because the Cardinals fans, that is baseball Cardinals, they're very devoted. And there's just something about the fans. And they've said sweet, sweet, tearful goodbyes to some players who've just spent their entire career in St. Louis. I've not been to St. Louis except once, but I kind of like the place from this. All right, let us go around for final thoughts. Today we have lots of time for final thoughts because it's a small group and we're a little ahead of schedule. So in your final thoughts, and I'm going to call on Max first because he's just one of these guys who's got things, he can talk for a while spontaneously. With JS on deck, we want to give you a chance to just say some things. Disquisition, like what are you working through in Modpo right now? And you've got some time. So, sorry, Max, without any notice. JS on deck.
Well, I was surprised that we didn't get around to talking about boy breaking glass during this webcast, since I feel like that's been sort of a staple of
Yeah, we always
the
talk about
last
it. Well,
couple
now's
of
your chance.
years. Well, I would just encourage people to read it if they haven't read it already. It spawned so many discussions over the last couple of years, especially in this moment of righteous protest over the last like 4 or 5 years. It's a poem it sheds a lot of light on protest as a form of resistance, as a kind of political act, and it's also like so many of these other poems that have made their way into this week, whether in the main syllabus or in Modpo Plus. It does this crucial thing that the Week 5 poems do, which is to sort of be political, be sort of frank in that way, while also kind of containing a theory of poetics or language in them. And I think that's sort of I'm happy to see this week changing a little bit from the way we sort of first presented it, where perhaps those kinds of binaries that we started the conversation with today, that Denny took issue with, where those kinds of binaries were maybe a little bit more forward, a little bit more in the foreground. That was kind of more the way we were sort of organizing this week in these poems, and now we're looking more at actually how all of these kinds of other movements that are happening outside of a sort of more canonical or doctrinaire modernism are also doing very crucial theoretical work, I would say, or kind of, work in the space of poetics. And Boy Breaking Glass is one of those, as is the Fearing's Green Light that we read today, as is the Anne Spencer poem, as is pretty much all the poems we focused on today. I think, like Lindner's poem, is a little bit trickier in that regard, since it seems to to prove a little bit more the kind of point that Week 5 originally existed to prove. But it's worth close reading and paying attention to. And if you want to continue this conversation, join me in about 45 minutes on Zoom. The link is
love that, Max.
That's
You're
great.
very good at this. As we turn to JS, I'll just add a thought about Boy Breaking Glass, which is one of my favorite poems, of all time. It's really amazing. And just contemplate the first line: whose broken window is a cry of art. If you want to be, it is actually a dogmatic statement ultimately, but if you want to be dogmatic, you would either say, if you are sort of against public disturbance as an expression of dissatisfaction, anti-whatever, anti-street protest, where sometimes windows get broken, then you would say, no, the broken window is just vandalism. It's not a cry of art. And that we would associate from maybe the summer of 2020 to be a conservative or anti-radical statement. But when you're Gwendolyn Brooks, if you say a broken window is a cry of art, you might be standing opposite from that conservatism and arguing that windows need to be broken and we are in favor. So that's another form of dogmatism, but that's not what she's doing. What she's saying is, I am a poet, and I'm a poet who, in a poem that follows Cubism and other forms of modernism, that has a line, who has not Congress, lobster, love, luau, Regency Room, Statue of Liberty, runs a sloppy amalgamation, and therefore invokes Cubism, invokes fragments, shards of glass, the Cubist mode. It can't be dogmatic. It's saying that the broken window can be seen as an aesthetic. And there are lots of reasons to break a window, and one is to get that kaleidoscopic, fragmented view of a broken world. And that is not dogmatic. That is really, really complicated and invites a conversation about what art is. And she achieved it, even though everybody thought that what she was saying is, go ahead and break glass because of the racism of Chicago. We have to break glass in order for this to happen. It's amazing. It's an amazing gesture. JS, final thought? Followed by Kate.
Yeah, I guess what really kind of struck me about so many of the poems this week, for all that many of them are returns to older poetic structures or, playing with these kind of classical forms of poetry while injecting, new, quote unquote, new political or like social commentary. Thinking about both perhaps oldness of the poetic form, but also the contemporary, like present now, 2023 relevance of so many of them. And again, that as another not binary, but sort of contradiction, paradox, even what Jane was saying, the continuity / return, depending on how we want to frame it, both the continuity of these ideas or the sort of cyclicality of them and the way that they're reappearing in our society now is something that, is just sort of frustrating. Like both, these poems are so resonant and also the fact that they sort of read as well now in like 2020, like at close to 2030 as they did in 1930 is also harrowing, between the Langston Hughes poem too. I'm going to get the Dinner Guest Me.
Yeah.
Despite him writing as a Black man, like as an Asian, a Chinese American person, like also really feeling so much of that poem also resonated with me, this kind of sense of constantly being expected to speak on my race or confronted with something like white guilt. That are still, again, conversations that we're constantly having now, both in institutions, in university, academic institutions, and outside of it. But also to say, and this is, a little bit of a tangent, but also one to return back to Boy Breaking Glass. And one thing that happened when I was reading it, I used to work in children's literature. And one thing that was sort of a refrain of, what books mean to children is that they're either windows or mirrors. So it's either a reflection, a representational reflection of yourself, whether it's, a white child or a Black child or whoever, all forms of identity, all types of identity, or it's a window into someone else's life. And here, this is definitely sort of bringing a very different context, but the way that like the window, this passage, the seeing through to the other or the seeing through to someone whose walk of life you personally don't understand, how even resisting that opacity, is something that comes up a lot, I think, in sort of a lot of, diasporic or ethnic poetry. But resisting transparency or resisting like constantly presenting your inner life through a transparent window, like that broken window is also, the resistance of that is also a form of art. I'm thinking, here about the line, I shall create, if not a note, a whole, how it can be something like erasure poem, but it can also be, again, that sort of resistance to rendering yourself towards a universal meaning, like in parentheses, white audience. And yeah, I don't know. I guess that was just something kind of particular and rooted in sort of my own reading of the Brooks poem. But kind of overall, just being struck by the way that so many of the sort of cries of many of the poems this week are ones that sort of still resonate, again, 60, 70, 80, 90 years onwards.
JS, wow, you said two things, both of which are profound and brilliant. And I just want to comment on both quickly. The first is thinking about your own invitations to, your own being the dinner guest, that experience of expectation, limitation. I mean, I think that the Hughes poem, we've called it in this group, you haven't been here for it because this is your first year, but we've called it meta-pedagogical in the sense of in the sense of the guest basically in the context of a class, the analogy of a class, the guest is invited as a student but winds up being expected to be a teacher. And that is like, when a teacher makes that flip happen, it can be very offensive. You know, you're a guest at this conversation, which is supposed to teach us. Now I expect you to be the authority, even though we just invited you to be a guest. And that's flipping the power grid without actually changing the power. And I think that poem really needs to teach us how to treat a guest. And that whether guest is the right category for being part of a conversation. And the answer is obviously no. And the second thing you said about boy breaking glass, I'm definitely gonna make it a segment for ModPo Plus because it's just so brilliant. I mean, the window, the kind of non-transparency that one needs, that is all about most of the poems. We must reject the assumption of transparency, even though I think in the United States and in North America and in much of Europe and elsewhere, transparency is assumed to be a good thing. You hear the word transparency all the time. Here at the university, the administration, like, we want to be more transparent. No, you don't. So I think that whole question of transparency is really important, and the window is a metaphor here in that poem as well as so many other places. Thank you, JS. Thank you so much. We're going to go to Kate and then to Allie. Final thoughts?
I'm still thinking about nouns as a particular site of modernist experimentation. In the Anne Spencer poem and the Erasure poems, certainly, but also extending to the Imagists and Stein, and how it's a theme that runs through all of ModPo, because language abstracts and nouns have a tendency to replace their reference, as all the talk of roses demonstrates.
Yeah.
And I wanted to throw into that particular mix, and I don't know which week it appears in, but Rosemary Waldrop's renounification of the Declaration of Independence, which I believe is a procedural N+7 replacement of all the nouns, and how messing with the nouns in that way and all these other ways we've seen defamiliarizes language in ways that are highly political.
Absolutely. I think it might seem to belong to week 9, but I believe it's in week 10. And it's great, and I can't wait to get there. And I'm so glad you guys on November 1st are supporting the aforementioned Rosemary Waldrop. Thank you. Allie, followed by Laynie. Final thoughts?
I was just thinking about a couple of things while JS was talking. I think, the point about the resistance, like shattered glass as resistance to transparency, and what that is doing aesthetically and functionally and politically. It just, I can't hear that without also then thinking of Brooks's Truth, which we didn't talk about this week, and the ways that poem Truth ties back to Tell All the Truth, and Dickinson's also resistance to transparency in that poem, and the import of that. And then I was also just thinking, the people change, and it is an exaggeration that the people change. I've also been thinking this week a lot about how resonant, like scarily resonant, so many of these poems are, how like directly applicable they are to today. So I'm generally really grateful, as always, to be here in these conversations and get to listen to all of you discuss these poems, and everyone in office hours and who calls in. And just to look forward to next week, I wanted to shout out Sharon Wells in the webcast forum, who posted a picture of her camper van. And she said, yes, Elle, me and John and Arlo will be there in this very, very compact camper. And there's a little picture of a dog. So
exciting.
check that out.
Sharon, if you need more detail about our itinerary, not just the two public events, just write to me or to ModPo, and Laynie and I will send you all the details. We'd love to have you and John follow us around if you like. We're going to start in Glasgow, and then we're heading to Edinburgh, where we're going to have two public events, but we're doing a lot along the way. So it'd be good to see you guys and to see your wonderful dog, Arlo, I think. Yes. Okay, Laynie Brown, final thought.
I just want to say wow, because it's just been such an amazing gathering, and so much is still resonating of what's been said. I was also thinking about Boy Breaking Glass and Dinner Guest Me, two of my favorite poems, and just really thinking about the broken glass and the problems of transparency that J.S. so brilliantly raised with a broken glass or a mirror, right? What do we really know? But I'm just going to turn to the chat and just shout out a couple of things. Where is it? Colleen K says, I'm loving looking at the poems and transparency and glass in a different and new way, even after all these years. And I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Laynie. I agree. This has been a great conversation. Two final thoughts from me. One is to cite Janet P., who in the special subforum thread posted a question about mending wall, frost, saying that frost plays with the supernatural, a spell, elves, something that sends. It's something that takes that wall down, something that causes us to need to repair that wall. And Janet P. asks, what is it? What is it? It's not elves exactly. I'd rather he said it for himself, meaning the other guy, the neighbor. Is it metapoetic? And of course it is. But I want to be a little nasty to Frost in elaborating just a bit. It is definitely the poem. The it is the thing that takes the wall down, is the thing that causes Frost to want to have an annual conversation with someone else. Just once a year, by the way. To be the subject to someone's object, or to be the object to someone's subject, or to explore the possibility of intersubjectivity with the neighbor. And the thing that takes the wall down, that provides the excuse for these guys to have this custom, is the poem, probably. But I also want to say that the thing that takes a wall down in New England, is frost. Frost is what brings a wall down. You get the freezing. Kate knows a little of this. This is southern New England, but still, you spent enough time in Massachusetts. You get the hard frost, and then the wall, and then it unfreezes, and then freezes again, and the stone wall, it's round rocks, for goodness sakes. These guys need to stop using round rocks. And the walls start to collapse, and the answer is it's frost that does it, not the poem. It's
Frost heave.
It's a frost heave. Anyway, that was kind of a downer note to end on, but whatever. I just want to end by saying again, J.S., how wonderful I thought that those final thoughts were, the two final thoughts. And then finally, I just want to say hello to T. de los Reyes, who is in the Philippines. I think I always get this wrong. It's not, in Manila. She does live in Manila. T has been with us for 12 years, and she's a great, great person. And I'll just read her hello. She had a belated start this year. Hello, everyone. My name is T, and I've been a mentor here at ModPo since 2013. I live in Manila. ModPo has changed my life so much. It's just a gift that keeps on giving every year. I'm late to the party, as it's been a busy couple of weeks, but I hope to be more present now and in the coming days. I'm a poet, and writing occupies my life most of the time, but my day job involves me running my own branding and design studio. I geek about data and other tech things, just as I am a poetry nerd and proud of it. Hope that you are all enjoying this course so far and that you have discovered gems inside poems that will change your life. That's T, and I just want to say that T got to us because T was interested in the birth years of massive open online courses as a technical matter. T thought, oh, I'm interested. How are they going to pull this off, this tech? And T joined the most, are we both the most sophisticated and also the most retro tech MOOC ever? Like in the early years, there was actually a telephone. We used telephony. We used a POTS line. What does POTS mean?
No idea.
Chris?
Plain old telephone system.
Plain old telephone system, a POTS line for our call-ins. And T fell in love with the retro tech that we use in ModPo. And then she discovered the poems. So however you got here, Jane Ward, 12 years ago, you followed us, you stayed with us, and you made one of the nicest, and really most profound and moving calls we've ever gotten, and we love that you're with us. So thank you all, JS. Good luck with whatever else you have to do up there. Kate, great to see you as always. Max, Allie, be well out there in Long Island. Take good care of your family. Laynie, Chris, Zach, we will see you all from Scotland a week from tomorrow, Thursday, for our webcast. Take care. Have a good day.